I don't know about you, but the current political climate has been incredibly overwhelming, stressful, and re-traumatizing. It feels like there are never-ending breaking news headlines that somehow just get progressively worse by the day. And between the collective trauma that we are all experiencing and personal traumas that we have all individually endured, there are so many added layers of complexity when navigating our reality right now. I'm just coming back from a chaotic bath time and bedtime with my boys, and sometimes I feel alone in this, having to swap between two different worlds. But I know I'm not alone, especially not in this episode, because today I'm bringing you a very special guest and therapist to wade through all of this mess with us. We are going to talk about witnessing the political violence, all of the atrocities that we are seeing on social media, how to cope with what comes up for you after seeing that, including past traumas and any feelings of hopelessness, as well as ways to stay involved and engaged. From finding safe forms of media to get your news, to ways to support the community and even protesting. Because we can't just bury our heads in the sand. We have to do what we are capable of doing, and no job or role in change is too small. If you're new here, bonjour. Welcome to Blumera Podcast. My name is Brienne, and I am your host. Trigger warning here: if you have little ears, you might want to pause and put in some headphones or save this episode for later. As a survivor of both sexual assault and gun violence, who is just trying to make it through the endless files, photos, videos, and triggering information constantly being thrown into my face, I want to clarify that it is important for this information to be out there in a way that protects survivors, of course. It's important for others to see. It's not healthy for me to see, given my past traumas, and that has been a really hard lesson to learn. If you can relate to that, I will be sharing the forms of media that feel safest for me to consume at the end of this episode. That way you can also get trustworthy information in a way that does not re-traumatize you. But without further ado, let's get right into the call with Lilly Risch, a therapist and EMDR consultant. My first question I have for you is, what is collective trauma and how does it differ from personal trauma?
So I think it's important to note that trauma is about an experience, not an event. And so for individual trauma, when we experience an event, two people experience the same event. They could have one could experience trauma, one could not. So they could have a different sort of experience of that event. And that has to do with a lot of different factors. When we think about collective trauma, we are understanding collective trauma more as a widespread psychological harm experienced by a group, community, or society that share the same catastrophic event, right? So we are really seeing a collective response and a collective experience. And that's different than just individual.
That makes sense. I appreciate you bringing up the different perspectives too, because it is
Absolutely.
interesting how you can experience the same thing, but have different experiences within that
Absolutely.
experience.
Absolutely. And one thing too that I've been thinking about in prep for this podcast and just kind of overall as a therapist is so much of what can impact somebody experiencing trauma is when there isn't any attunement to the experience. And so like Gabor Mate talks about, trauma isn't about what just happened, it's about what happens inside us with the absence of compassionate witnessing. So much of what we're doing in therapy is doing that compassionate witnessing with our clients. And that's so much of, I think, what I'm driven to do now for people is working on naming the experience so that it's not just kept inside. But that I always like to think about that. Is there attunement to it or is there not attunement to it when I think about collective trauma as well?
I agree. How does an oppressive political climate contribute to collective trauma?
Sure. So oppressive political climate, right? We're thinking about policies and rhetoric that marginalize or dehumanize certain groups of people, right? So I think we see this throughout when there are specific attacks on certain groups of people. And so we can kind of think of it makes a lot of sense, right? That will impact this group. Not just that, but when somebody in power, right, is implementing these policies and having this narrative, right, really harmful narratives about certain groups of people, it feels incredibly threatening to that group of people. And so there then can be collective sort of experiences that can be passed down generation upon generation as well, that can create sort of like fear and feelings of, not being good enough, and sort of all of these feelings that really can impact a group. And so we experience that individually, but then we also have that as a group of people when it's happening to a specific group. That makes sense.
It does.
Yeah.
What are some of the psychological effects of witnessing injustice, corruption, and harm on a national scale?
So when I think about this, I think about a whole range of different humans, right? I think we have people who have maybe lived pretty privileged lives and not experienced, I'm going to say, quote unquote, trauma, right? When we think about the definition of trauma that most people understand, that's something that is violent, a sexual abuse or sexual assault, natural disaster. When I talk about trauma, I think about it as a much more expansive conversation and much more expansive definition. Trauma is something that has impacted us, right, in an adverse way. And it can be something like a lack of something in childhood, or something that happens over and over and over and over again that just becomes what's familiar, right? So not as much as like a single event. I think we typically think about a single event as quote unquote traumatic, but I think about what I work with is more of like an ongoing experience, like an ongoing experience of specific relationships and specific events. So if people have, if we have experienced these things, I think a lot about being in relationships where there's a lot of control or there's a lot of power over. When there's a present situation, like when we're witnessing that again, that can bring all of the old feelings up. So that's one thing that can happen. The word that is widely used is triggered. I personally don't love that word because of gun violence. I really don't love it. So I like to say activated, right? But the word that most people use is triggered, right? So we can get then activated or triggered, meaning what is held in our nervous system, what is held in our emotional brain, in our body can come up again. And so that can look so different depending on the person. So psychological effects can look like high anxiety, right? Panic, fear. It can look like that is more hyper arousal. It can also look more like hypoarousal, which is shut down, stuck, like isolating and things like that. And so I think there are also psychological effects and things that we experience that are very adaptive, like things like grief and anger that are very true and real, right? It's so tricky because I think when we're experiencing a witnessing of something and it's tricky to say, like, how likely is it that that's going to happen to me, right? Like, how close is that to me? Because sometimes when we're witnessing something, like, for example, on, a video of something happening to somebody else, we feel it in our body as if it's happening to us, right? And so as a therapist, it's so tricky sometimes to say, like, how likely is it that that's going to happen to you? Because I think there's a lot of unknown now. It's just a tricky place to be when I'm working with people in terms of we need to ground to the present, and we also have to remind ourselves, like, that's not here right now. And I think there's definitely fear, like a collective fear of things happening.
I agree.
Yeah, you feel that as well, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
also love you bringing up the triggered and the relationship to gun violence and how that in itself can be activating, just the word alone. I have never really thought of it that way. I have experienced gun violence and I
Mm.
often use the word triggered, but I haven't put that together. So I really appreciate you bringing
Yeah.
that to my attention.
Yeah, absolutely. Trying to find a better word because activated hasn't quite stuck. So if you
Mhm.
think of any, let me know.
Yeah, I will let you know, but I do like activated. I mean, triggered is a word and I know what it means, but activated, I can like feel it in my body, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
So we talked about kind of the psychological effects of witnessing injustice, corruption, and harm. What are the psychological effects of constantly seeing your rights debated, dismissed, or threatened? So when it starts to feel a little bit closer to you, what are some of those psychological effects that we'll start to see?
Yeah, well, I definitely think fear, right? Ongoing kind of sense of fear. And when I think about fear, not as just like we are meant to feel fear, right? We're meant to feel primal affects because they, as a mammalian species, we want to stay safe and
Mhm.
continue our species. Like that is the goal of us living, right? So I think a lot about animal affective neuroscience, and it really helps me understand like why are we doing what we're doing to kind of get to the root of it, right? So if you hear me talk about animals and mammalian brain, that's why, right? That makes a lot of sense to me. So if we're thinking about on a deeper level, like what are our goals? We want to we need to continue to survive, right? So if we're experiencing a threat, like a threat to our identity, that doesn't feel good for us, right? So there can be the kind of a state of fear, right? If you think about a self, our self, like a self or identity being erased, right, which is happening to, for example, the trans community, that feels really threatening to us. Like as mammals, we are like, no, we need to survive, like we need to continue, right? So a constant state of anxiety can definitely create not just psychological, but there can be a physical impact to that, right? So higher heart rate, trouble sleeping. We can see things like nightmares. We can see things like trouble focusing and things like that. Of course, the way that people respond to threats of rights being debated, dismissed, or threatened depends so much on a person's lived experience and genetics, right? What has their life looked like until here? And so it can really impact kind of how people respond to it. So other responses, like I said, can be isolation, depression. Isolation and depression, I think, especially isolation, is something that's really tricky because one of the protective factors is community, right? And so people being together is so important right now. But if we're in a constant state of fear, there's that barrier to being together. And I've noticed that a lot in my work where people need togetherness and to get out and to be around people, but then they're in a constant state of fear of being hurt, right? Not just rights being debated, but like actually being physically hurt. And so it's a tricky place to be. And as a therapist, it's really tricky to encourage one way or another, which I don't, right? Just to hold space for that conflict.
Mhm.
Right?
I can absolutely relate to that. I'm a people person, and I mean, we all need community, but I, love interacting with people. But then also, there's times where being out in public doesn't feel safe, or getting to know new people or being in new groups doesn't always feel the safest. So, there is that kind of like inner conflict that you talk about.
Yeah. Can I ask you what's helped you with that?
Yeah, of course. I really just honoring where I'm at. If I make plans, I try to be really gentle with myself. I feel like maybe I'm not the most reliable, but most of my friends understand and know my background.
Yeah.
It's kind of just like a play it by ear type of thing. I'll make plans and I try really, really hard to honor those plans and be able to make it. But if I'm having a day where I'm more activated, like you said,
Yeah.
or if something has happened, if I am just not like in the right headspace,
Mhm.
and I try to talk myself into it, I get ready, I let them know I'm kind of like on the fence or maybe not doing well. Yeah, I just try to honor where I'm at. Sometimes it feels good, like a good challenge and kind of like a form of exposure therapy. Like, okay, I'm up for that
Yeah.
challenge today. And
Right.
sometimes it's like, oh no, I'm definitely not up for that challenge. Like, my watch is telling me my heart rate is up, and I'm thinking all of these different scenarios that I'm kind of afraid of, or I'm just really dreading it, and not the person itself or the experience itself, but just pushing myself out of that comfort zone. But I do really try to push myself.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And when you said exposure, I'll just put a quick plug in here for EMDR because that's what I do in my practice. But it is, we sometimes think of it as a type of exposure therapy, definitely not exposure therapy, but really where we're thinking about not just traumatic events, but also thinking about like future events that could be super activating to us. So I just wanted to quickly mention that has been a really powerful tool for people that I've worked with and
Yeah,
for myself as well personally. So,
yeah, I think that's
yep.
actually the next form of therapy that I'm going to be pursuing. I really love my therapist right now, but
Nice.
that is something that's like next on my list. That also made me think about the window of tolerance. And when I think about where I'm at on a scale of 1 to 10 and how triggered or activated I am, if I'm around a 4, I will challenge myself. I will tell myself, like, hey, just go for a little bit, or just get in the car and drive around, take those first initial steps. But if I'm above a 4, that's kind of how I gauge where I'm at and how to honor that feeling and what I'm
Yeah,
able to, like the capacity that I have.
absolutely. I love scaling questions.
Yeah,
So,
me
and
too.
I love scaling questions. I use them all day, every day.
What's the most popular scaling question that you find yourself using?
Well, for EMDR, we use what's called the SUDS, subjective unit of disturbance, meaning like how yucky is it? How yucky does it feel right now for you? And we use the word yucky. So we'll say when you think about that memory and when you think about your dad, right?
Mm.
Sometimes I do a lot of attachment trauma stuff. And you think about this belief, I'm not good enough. How yucky does it feel? 0 to 10. 10 is the highest and 0 is neutral. So that's the one that I use most days.
Such a relatable word too, yucky. Like,
It's so relatable.
yes. And like sometimes the therapeutic terms can feel like you can't attach to them as much, but like yucky, everybody knows what yucky feels like.
Everyone does. And we're actually trained to use that word.
I love that.
I love it too. I love it too. It's a very like intuitive therapy. I really, really love it.
We
So
should definitely talk more about that. And as soon as you said attachment therapy, that's also something I have down on my list for potential topics in the
yeah,
future. So I'll keep you, if you like this experience and how it turns
absolutely.
out, I would love to have you back already for that.
Absolutely. I love doing attachment work. It's hard, but it's good.
Mhm. Yeah, no, it absolutely is. I had that on my, like, higher up on my list, but then the political stuff came in and I was like, okay, we need to address this now.
I know.
Why do so many people feel exhausted, numb, or hopeless in response to political events?
People feeling exhausted, numb, hopeless is a theme that I see all the time now,
Mhm,
right? I do think that some, life experience before now is, of course, important, especially thinking about how much control people feel that they have in their life now, right? And how activating some of this is. I see a lot of hopelessness and exhaustion for people whose lives are not directly impacted right now, anyway, by what's happening at the national level. So I do think sometimes there is a level of compassion fatigue. There is a level of like cognitive overload where there's a lot of information and it's sort of playing all the time. Like the actual TV is playing all the time,
mhm,
right? So that makes sense that then is putting somebody into a very overwhelmed and then numb state. So sometimes if things are so overwhelming to our nervous system, we just numb out and shut it down
mhm,
and disconnect it, right? So it is also very true that we do have a sense of powerlessness because we are powerless in certain parts of this, right? So that we're feeling that is true,
mhm,
right? There's truth to that. And so I think that's just kind of a way we feel things that are true a lot of the time,
mhm,
right? So we feel powerless because to a certain extent, like we are powerless in this. We can't change it, just one of us, right? Not to say that we can't take action and do micro things and continue to take steps forward and advocate and join mutual aid groups and all of that. But what is happening is happening at a higher level. And I keep moving, if for people who can't see me, like I keep moving my hand above my head because there is an actual like power over, right? That feels incredibly bad
mhm.
to us, right?
I
So
appreciate that visual.
yeah, I have used circle of control so many times in the past like 6 months. So the circle, the kind of circle looks like a donut. It's just a visual. I don't know if you've seen it. It's just a visual and a really easy, great thing to think about and talk about in therapy. So it's a circle on the outside and a circle on the inside. Circle on the outside is things I don't have control over. Circle on the inside is
Mm,
have control over. So it's a really great way to understand like and make it explicit. Like what do I not have control over? What do I have control over? Obviously, national, international politics is on the outside. People's reactions to me outside. People's moods like outside.
outside. And I'll put that on the screen for anybody watching too. I'll put a little graphic up
It's a good one. It's a really, really good one and simple, but tricky sometimes. And sometimes we find ourselves, I think a lot of internal distress comes from resisting what we can't change. It is the serenity prayer of AA, which not because I, ascribe to AA or religion or anything like that, but the concept of it is brilliant. The concept of it is accept the things I can't change and have the wisdom to know the difference. So that's really what we're talking about with concepts like radical acceptance, for example, that I think is a great skill now that we can talk about that too. But
Mhm,
when people do feel exhausted, numb, hopeless, it's because there really are things that are out of our control. And as humans, that does not feel good.
Mm-hmm.
for us.
And that like may not feel good to hear too, but it's also validating to know
Yeah.
that like the feelings, I loved when you said that feeling is true and that experience is true. Just being validated in that sense can help you move more towards acceptance. What would you recommend to somebody who's having a hard time accepting something is outside of their control?
It's a tricky answer, right? Because I think sometimes we have to do a lot of work before we get to accepting.
Mm-hmm.
Like if somebody has experienced something that was like sexual abuse, right? To say to a survivor of sexual abuse, just accept it can feel incredibly minimizing. And it is not just that easy. Also, acceptance doesn't mean it's okay. Acceptance doesn't mean we like it. Acceptance doesn't mean it was fair. No, acceptance is sort of like accepting the truth of what happened,
Mm-hmm.
right? But accepting the truth of what happened always and usually involves like all of the other things that come with it. So grief, anger, changing relationships, like processing everything that's happened
Mm-hmm.
before we can get to acceptance. So with what's happening politically right now, sometimes we have to go through those processes as well. Like we feel rage, we feel grief. And I don't know that it's as like I don't think it's linear.
Mm-hmm. And I appreciate you mentioning that acceptance isn't being okay with it. I've had a lot of those feelings as a survivor of sexual assault.
Yeah.
And when I hear people tell me that, like, you have to accept it and move on, it's really harsh. And it feels very much like you are allowing it or saying it's okay, but
Hmm.
really it's just about like acknowledging it, feeling it, and then integrating that truth into your life moving forward.
Exactly. So well said.
How can we protect our nervous system from constantly being in a state of activatedness or fight or flight due to political stress?
Sure. So I love mindfulness practices and being in nature. I love using nature as a support. I do hope that most of us can find pieces of nature now, but that's always something that I'm talking about with people is how healing and connecting nature is and how it is proven that birds singing and chirping calms us down
Mm.
because those birds are indicating that there are no predators around.
Ooh.
So it is a very it's in us,
Mm-hmm.
like it's in us, right? I even tell people if it's winter and Wisconsin gets terrible winters now. I mean, not now, but I lived in Colorado, so it's been the hardest thing about moving here. But I even tell people in the winter just put on a Spotify track of birds chirping,
Mm.
right? So even just something as simple as that, but there's a reason why we all, when we talk about like happy place, calm place, and with EMDR, for example, it's usually nature,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so as much as using nature as much as we can, I also think using community as much as we can as well.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need to be talking about what happened today, for example, but we need to be around people who are values aligned, like minded.
Mm-hmm.
Supporting of ourselves and our identity is incredibly protective and helpful. I think that spirituality can be helpful for people. And when I say spirituality, I even think of being in nature as
Mm-hmm.
a form of spirituality, you know. But some people do find comfort in certain spirituality. Some don't, and that's, it's all very individual.
Mm-hmm.
I think boundaries are really important. And so if somebody has experienced trauma and it's really coming up, it's like really activating, we need to set boundaries. Like it is okay to turn the news off. It is okay to block people on social media, right? We can still be informed without having to see things. Like we can still understand what's happening in the world. We can maybe have somebody sift through it for us. We can find a specific source that we're using to get information without having to see things because there's so much that is on social media, for example, that we're swiping through and we just can't control what pops up.
Mm-hmm.
And that can then activate fight flight, right? Response. So I think boundaries are really important as well. Mental health support, of course, I'm always an advocate for. I think that we have this conversation in my group practice about when people come and ask us, like, what are your political views?
Mm-hmm.
It is very individual per therapist, but we're very clear in my practice that what our values are. And I'm a social worker by, my degree is in social work, and our values are very aligned with social justice and advocacy, right? So it's very easy for me to say, these are my professional values, right? But that's been a great way for us to be able to talk as a group about what's happening right now in the world, just bringing it back to values. So I think that's something that can also help people when they're talking about their own values and who around them is aligned to that.
So many good points
Yeah.
there. I love the bird. I'm not like a huge bird fan, like holding them and stuff. I don't mind it, but like it's not like holding a cat or a dog for me. Like it doesn't
I
bring out the
know.
same excitement. But I love attracting them to my home and having a
Oh,
lot of bird feeders out. I love feeding them. I love seeing them. I love hearing them. And I've never thought about it like that. And
I
when you were talking about how it tells you that there's no danger.
Isn't it so interesting? I love learning the neuroscience behind things, and I just nerd out on it.
No, me too. I'm so happy that you brought that up.
Yes, I love
And the tip about filtering what social media or what
it.
news outlets and what stories you are getting because it's so different. I have like a stress disorder that makes me sick, and I'll be sick for like up to 36 hours, like debilitating, cannot take care of kids. And I
Yep.
had to really filter out the news. And I
Yeah.
now get it from like a couple of sources through newsletter. I have to,
Mhm.
it's like a daily update. I choose when I am ready and
That's
in a
excellent.
good place, like the window of tolerance. Like, can I read it tonight? No, I'll read it. I'll try again in the morning. And it's so different watching, for me
Mhm.
at least, watching somebody, they're trying to get emotion. I mean, when you're speaking, you are trying to pull on emotion. Whereas, like reading, you can still do that. But I have picked sources that are very like factual, political historians. Like, here's what it is. There's no like sense of fear. Yeah, it's just a very different experience. I'm still staying updated and engaged, but it's on my terms and in a way that makes me feel a lot safer.
That's excellent. That's excellent. And there is a lot out there, right? Like I do think that people are just finding the right source for you, right? Whether that be like one podcast at the same time every day. And I
Mhm.
love what you're saying about it's in my control.
Mhm.
Because when we're swiping through, it's not in our control because we don't know what's going to pop up. And then
Mhm.
all of a sudden, we're in a downward spiral at
Mhm.
8 o'clock at night.
Yeah. You're trying to go to sleep.
I mean, it's happened to me, right? Like, and it's okay that we can't receive news like that. It's okay, right? It isn't okay to just bury our head in the sand if we're privileged and we don't need to listen to it because it doesn't impact us, right? But it is okay to receive the news in a way that we can still function for our kids. We can still show up for work
Exactly.
at work. We can still, I mean, function for our kids is one of the biggest things that's been helping me through
Mhm.
all of this is just needing to continue to put one foot in front of the other
Mhm.
as a mom. So I don't know if you relate to
Raising,
that.
no, absolutely raising the change
Yep.
you want to see.
Yeah.
I have to put myself in check for that very reason a lot of the times because I'm like, I could sit here and consume, like, especially in the mornings. I may try to, if I'm in a really good space and I have support throughout the day and I know I am not, going to be their sole caretaker for
Yeah.
13 hours straight. I can look at the news, but mostly I do it in the evening when I no longer have to care for them, when they are no longer relying on me to be
Yep.
present and not checked out, not stressed out, not worrying about their future and mine.
Yep.
It just makes a bigger difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that.
Going back to sexual assault survivors or domestic violence, any sort of trauma survivor,
Yep.
but in particular, when it comes to sexual violence, how does it impact a survivor's healing journey when someone with a history of sexual violence holds immense power?
Hmm. I mean, it can be incredibly re-traumatizing,
Hmm.
right? Because sexual abuse is about power and control.
Hmm.
And so it's a violation of intimate like boundaries, and power and control is used
Hmm.
all throughout. And so it can be incredibly re-traumatizing to have somebody in power who has a history of sexual abuse.
Hmm.
Right? And it's incredibly damaging as well that that's denied, right? Or that's like it has people questioning,
Hmm.
right? One of the most important things for people who have experienced sexual abuse is that there's somebody there to attune to it and say, I believe you. This thing happened. I believe you, right? And so most people that I work with didn't get that,
Hmm.
right? They didn't get that. And that's when trauma becomes a lot worse,
Mhm.
right? Because there is an attunement to this really terrible, really violating experience. And so it gets really complicated and complex. And that's when complex trauma happens. Things like dissociation can happen, things like chronic medical issues can happen because there's this big emotional material where there's no one to attune to it. So it has to go somewhere in the
Mhm.
body, right? Or we have to disconnect from it, right? So when somebody with what's happening right now, somebody in power has had all of these felony convictions, right? And I think that it's very triggering
Mhm.
people. I think it's very activating for people,
Mhm.
right? So I think that healing, it's not linear, right? I think that people can experience some psychological impact to that.
Mhm.
And I think one thing that's important for me as a therapist is to attune to it, to
Mhm.
say, yeah, this is true, right? Like, I believe that he did that
Mhm.
because people who've experienced sexual abuse don't lie.
Mhm.
That is a myth,
Mhm.
right? I worked in child protection for about 7 years in Arapahoe County in Colorado, where I investigated alongside law enforcement cases of child sexual abuse. And one of the biggest myths for adults as well is that people lie
Mhm.
about it, and that just isn't true. The research does not show that.
Mhm.
Right. And so we have to collectively try to dispel these myths, these what they're called rape myths, right? And really believe people,
Mhm.
right? It is not some people don't want to just go and disclose sexual abuse, right? There is no reason to want to do that, right? People don't lie about it. And so that's one of the biggest things that I think what we can do is we can tell people that we believe them,
Mhm.
right?
And that it matters. And
Yes.
I think that has been really healing. And even just hearing you say that now, there's a little piece of me that healed.
Oh,
Because
good. I
it
love
is
that.
hard to witness
Uh,
what feels like, at least for me, that behavior being excused, or like it's not
yes.
bad enough to
Yes.
not want this person in power, or like not support that person. Like it's just not, I can excuse that. That's how it feels. So it's really validating
Absolutely.
to hear.
Absolutely. I'm so glad. And when there are blatant lies about what somebody did, right? When people in power are lying and saying, no, I didn't do that, right? That can become incredibly confusing for people. It can, just like if something happens to a child and a parent says that didn't happen, you're making it up.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that is a whole other layer of the onion, if you will, right? That can then having somebody question their reality is really confusing and really damaging to somebody's sense of self.
And
Yeah.
witnessing other people do that for other people, I know for me, it makes it feel not as safe with that person. If
Yeah.
I'm witnessing somebody like excusing or denying or defending somebody who has been accused of sexual violence,
Yes.
for me, that does not feel like a safe person for me. That does
Yeah.
not feel like somebody I want to bring my personal lived experience with sexual violence to, because you don't know that you're going to be met with that attunement or support or just knowing that they believe you.
Yes. Yes. And I just was this just got me thinking about I wonder if reports of sexual violence will be decreasing,
Mm,
with the current administration. I wonder if they will be decreasing.
mhm.
I certainly hope not.
Yeah,
Right.
me too.
And maybe it depends a lot on kind of like area of the country and
Mhm,
culture of law enforcement. I've worked with incredible patrol officers, detectives, just absolutely incredible. And then I've also like encountered some where they're just more dismissive,
mhm.
right? Or minimizing of the survivor's experience. But I know you know this, but I can't emphasize how important the reaction to that first disclosure is, right? That can even just one detective saying, I believe you, can be so important. But I certainly hope that reports don't decrease, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's an impact.
No, I agree. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, I agree. I
Yeah.
also just want to add in too, I have made a couple of reports. I've had a couple of instances.
Yeah.
Nobody has ever been prosecuted,
Yep.
but I
Yep.
don't regret it. And for me, having perspective, whether or not I was believed
Yeah.
by people along the way who were there, people who witnessed it, people who, law enforcement even, I
Yeah.
don't regret it. And it's always on somebody's record. And I don't know how to say this nicely, but like
Yeah,
I believe if somebody is capable of doing that once, they are capable of doing it again. And that person may rely on your report. Not that you should be responsible
absolutely.
for anybody else's, but it creates a track record and it makes it that much easier to prosecute in the future.
Absolutely. Well, that's studied,
Mhm.
right? That people who do exhibit behaviors of sexual perpetration have multiple, if not 10, like over 10 or even hundreds of victims. That is factual, right? So it absolutely is. I also think that there's something that can be healing and powerful about making a report
Mhm.
and letting go of that, unfortunately, letting go of the outcome.
Yeah, hardest things, but
Yes.
it is really healing to even just be able to like use your voice in that way, whether or not you take it further, like just making the report alone. I personally just, if I have those moments of doubt where I feel like I lost in the situation, or I'm not that it's like a win or lose, but it's like, oh, there's a report. Like they have
Yes.
left a lasting impact on me, and I have left a
Yeah.
lasting impact on them.
Yes.
Not that it's like an eye for an eye, but you know what I mean.
Absolutely. I know what you mean. Yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah. It's so hard when we don't see the outcome that's deserved, is what's coming to mind, but I don't know if that's the right word, because sometimes it is like I've heard survivors say there isn't really anything that they could get. And I know there's no number of years, right, that could make it okay or like fair, right? But I do think when there is some sort of conviction, of course, that makes it feel a lot more validated. But unfortunately, that doesn't happen as much as it needs to.
So, what can a survivor do if they're feeling re traumatized by political news or discussions, like hearing people that you love supporting and defending somebody else's sexual violence? What can a survivor do?
I like to help people come up with back pocket responses, like ways to set boundaries or step out of the conversation. So being able to have responses that you like rehearse or have in your phone if it's tricky to remember them, to set that boundary. Obviously seeking support, so calling the people that are in your support circle, and sharing somebody said something that was really unfair and I just need to talk about it today.
Mhm.
Self-care, of course, I like to think about external and internal. So, like, external, of course, take that bubble bath, like, get some rest. Don't go to dinner with friends if it's too much, right? Internal, things like deep breathing, meditation, mindfulness, and then also trying to set internal boundaries.
Mhm.
Like, I'm not going to take that with me,
Mhm.
or that's about their stuff,
Mhm.
right? Or that's their hurt and pain, not mine. So internal boundaries are a lot harder. It takes sometimes like working with a therapist or doing some, deep emotional work to work on shifting some of that. But really being able to say something like, that's not about me. Like, I'm going to let that go. I'm going to walk in my house and let that go today. And then of course boundaries with living exposure, right? I, have talked to people who they're even triggered from seeing the president's face,
Mhm.
or hearing his voice is triggering. You have to limit that. If that's triggering you, don't look at that, right? Turn it off, listen to something different, get your news in a different way.
Mhm.
So we have to do what we need to take care of ourselves during this time.
Mhm. What would you say to survivors who feel like healing is impossible when the world is constantly re traumatizing them?
This is so hard, right? This is so hard, because as a human, as a therapist, I want things to be easy for people. I want people to be able to heal and live their lives and not suffer, right? That's not true. That's not the truth of the world. So there's a ton of suffering, especially right now. And unfortunately, I worry that might continue. So I think we need to reframe what healing is. Healing isn't just like, let's go toward that rainbow with a pot of gold at the end. Healing is an ability to bounce back and have more internal resources. Healing is being able to watch something on the news that's absolutely terrible and still be able to feel regulated when we're going to pick up our child from school, right? Healing is being able to grieve and feel our feelings and then being able to sleep that night,
Mhm.
So healing isn't this like not feeling any distress or anything like that. So we need to, though, be able to kind of move through the difficult things in a way that doesn't completely derail us.
Mhm.
And so that's what healing is
Mm-hmm.
to me. And I think we need to continue to hold hope for each other right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I won't not have that, right? And I say that to my clients, like, I will hold hope for you if you don't have it right now. I also think empowering each other to do what we can, to take little steps in a direction that's new and different, but that's going to help us feel better and maybe contribute. But this is tricky, I think. This is hard. This is something that I struggle with as a therapist, and it just comes back to me to acknowledging the truth of what's happening and helping people not get derailed,
Mm-hmm.
helping people hold steady through this and build up their nervous systems and their resilience so that they're not completely derailed.
Mm-hmm. How can we hold space for our anger, grief, or despair without letting it derail or consume us? I know that's tricky, but
It is tricky. It is tricky. I think that one thing that I do a lot as a therapist is teach people how to feel.
hmm
Teaching people how to feel, because a lot of the times we didn't have anyone attuning to our feelings. And by that I mean sometimes, especially with my child when he was younger, right? Feelings are like a wave. It's like this temper tantrum, it comes up and then it comes down. But what happens if we like stop the wave and we're like, don't feel that, go to your room, and no one's there to like ride the wave with them? It gets stuck and we don't know how to feel, right? So much of my work is helping people learn how to feel and slowly increasing the window of tolerating feelings. So it's not just an overnight process feeling, right? But some things that I like to do are like set timers for how long you're going to feel
hmm
sad. Set a timer, 10 minutes. I'm going to cry in my car for 10 minutes and then I'm going to go inside and change the channel.
hmm
Make dinner, right? I think creative outlets. I have an art therapist at my practice, so she does a lot of like expressive, obviously. The expressive therapies like dance and art can be incredible, holding space for anger, grief,
hmm
despair, right? And that can be something as simple as just like doing a collage
hmm
on your own, right? I think community connection is huge. Being able to dance with a group, for example. Peaceful protests can be incredibly healing. Think about it. We're in a group and we're doing things like chanting and singing. How much more healing can we get,
hmm
right? With people who are like-minded, values aligned. And so I tell people, if you feel safe, go to a protest for the experience of it, the process of it. It can be incredibly healing to feel anger with other people and to express that with your voice and your body.
At the same time as others.
Oh my gosh, goosebumps, right?
I know I have them too.
Goosebumps too. So
Collective
powerful.
experience.
Yes, there's our experience.
The proof of it.
Yeah.
What are the dangers of suppressing or ignoring the pain that is caused by political or collective trauma?
Yeah, so if we're not expressing our feelings, they can show up in different ways. They can show up in emotions that aren't the true emotions, like irritability, anger, blaming somebody else, trying to have control over something else in our life, right? So definitely like impaired relationships and then somatic symptoms as well. I do think it's so incredibly important for us to attune to our feelings and to be able to have other people to do that as well.
A safe space to do that.
Exactly.
That reminds me of you talking about holding hope for your clients when they don't have it themselves. How
Mm.
can a listener hold on to hope when it feels like everything is getting worse? I know turning towards somebody who can hold the hope for them, that alone, I just love
Yeah.
that concept. I don't
Mhm.
know that I mean, I guess I've experienced that. Nobody's just used those words, but what can somebody do other than turning towards somebody who can maybe hold hope for them?
Yeah.
They find the hope again.
Absolutely. I like it's part of, I'm not even remembering what this is from. It's probably one of the window of tolerance or polyvagal theory mapping that I've used, but it's the conversation and using the word glimmers. I don't know if you've heard that before, but using the word finding the glimmers in the day to day and focusing on that. Also finding the stories of hope
Mhm.
because they're there, they're
Mhm.
out there, right? It's just sometimes we don't hear about them or sometimes we don't experience them. So if we're needing to feel more hopeful, I do think it's fair for us to then connect with people like who have more hope and learn more about that. So focusing on the micro moments of hope, right? Like this is something that I can really connect with. Also focusing on like what we have control over, being able to do something for somebody else, even if it's smiling at a person at the grocery store or getting the can of tomato sauce for them when they need it, or baking cookies for your neighbor, those things help us as well. So those little actions are going to create a good connection and a sense of like, I can make somebody feel better. I can make a difference here. So it's not that we're pretending everything's fine if we're hopeful, but it's believing that what we do still matters.
It makes perfect sense. And I love kind of looking at your circle of control and being able to pick where you want to have control, making cookies for your neighbors, or instead of trying to control the things outside of it and finding hope in those things, you can find hope in the area where you have control.
Yes, exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. Yeah.
How can we resist the urge to shrink or self abandon in the face of oppression?
Ooh, this is hard, right?
Mhm.
Because there's such a nervous system response to somebody having power over us and threatening us,
Mhm.
right? Like that's that kind of shrinking shutdown that is actually a nervous system response of being small enough so that we don't feel the big impact when we're about to die. Like it's so true and so real, right? I think that it's really important to ground to the present. So grounding can be using sensory input, like five senses to ground to the present. And then grounding also can be like reminding yourself where you are, where you live, what resources you have,
Mhm.
like maybe making plans, right? Where if something does happen, right? What can I do? Where can I go? Gathering your resources, connecting with people that might need to support you if needed. And then I also think like calling on your community, right? And connecting with people when you're starting to maybe feel that, right? I'm kind of feel like I'm slipping into this like shrinky feeling, right? Can I come over today? Like, can I be with somebody else? Because even just being with another safe human is incredibly regulating for us. Community does help us heal. And so if we're feeling like that's a moment, we're having these moments of, shrinking or isolating, like we really don't want to be doing that. We really want to be connecting.
Definitely feels so much better and less yucky.
Yes, less yucky, right?
How do we process the guilt when we feel like we should be doing more, but we're emotionally exhausted, activated, or being re traumatized?
So I think it goes back to what you're saying, what we were talking about with the window of tolerance, right? We're not effective if we're working outside of our window of tolerance. We're just not effective, right? We are there maybe, but we're spinning around. We're not helpful, right? So we need to really be able to restore and replenish and be able to keep showing up. It's a
Mhm.
marathon, I believe, not a sprint. We have to take breaks. We have to drink water. I think we need to understand and maybe talk to a mental health professional or people in our circle about what is enough. What are our expectations for ourselves? Like, what is this one niche or one project that I'm going to work on, right? What is the one kind of or one or two areas, right, that I'm going to focus on right now? Because we cannot do it all, but we can do things.
Mhm.
Like we can make an impact and we can take some steps forward, but we can't get overwhelmed by all of it. So I think we also need to, talk about what guilt is. Guilt is I'm doing something wrong. Shame is I am bad. That's just kind of a general way to think about it. So I think we can kind of just cognitively reframe that of like, I'm not doing anything bad if I'm resting. I am working on doing these things as a form of activism, right?
Mhm.
Or mutual aid.
And that rest is important to keep doing that work
Exactly.
and having the impact that you want to have.
Exactly. Yeah.
Going back to you saying that you like to give people like back pocket statements that they can pull from,
Yeah.
how can somebody set boundaries or what are some of those statements when friends or family members are invalidating their experiences, their political concerns, or just in general dismissing some of the experiences that they've had?
So I think it depends on the person. It depends on the setting, right? What is our goal in communicating, right? Is our goal to open up a conversation? Or is our goal to stop, right? Is our goal to just end the conversation and leave? Or do we have to stay in this place with somebody, right? So we could say something like, I'm going to stop you right there. I'm not talking about this tonight.
Mhm.
It's not the right time and it's not happening. Like we could say something as simple as that. We don't have to explain ourselves. We can just set that boundary, right? I think it's always good if we can set a boundary before we see somebody. Hey, I'm looking forward to seeing you tonight. Just to make it clear, I'm not talking about any current events. Like, I'm not talking about anything political, right? And I think it's important too to be able to debrief with somebody who understands, who's more values aligned, right? But it is okay to set boundaries that look like distance as well, like just not being able to spend as much time with somebody who is not aligned,
Mhm.
because that's harmful to your own, right, mental health and well-being. But I do think I do think it can be tricky.
No, I agree. And that's validating to hear because I know there was a lot of discourse online, like, why can't we all just get along? And can't we look past our differences or respect them? And it's nice to hear that you don't have to continually put yourself in a position where you feel activated or traumatized.
No, you don't. You don't have to put yourself in that position.
What are some small, everyday ways to reclaim personal power when the world feels overwhelming?
I'd love to hear if you have any of these as well, but there's so much that we can do, I think, right? I mean, one thing that I love is being able to move my body,
Yep.
like walking.
Mm.
I walk a lot. I get to walk my son to school and then I get to walk to my office. I'm very grateful for that. It's incredible being able to be outside because for me, nature does not feel overwhelming. It feels like it makes sense and it's simple, right? So being able to, I think, turn off the screen is a challenge for me, but something that I'm always continuously working on, right? I love positive self-talk that can sound really healing. So it can be something like, I matter, I'm important, I'm enough, I'm doing enough right now. I do a lot of inner child work with people. So this is the like internal family systems therapy. And it can look like, what would you say to that wounded part of you? What would you say to that part of you that feels powerless?
Mhm.
And so that can create very, very like meaningful, insightful, and powerful words of wisdom for yourself that can sound like, well, I would tell them that we're safe now. I would tell them that we're 35 years old now. I
Mhm.
would tell them that we have these three people that would help us if we needed it.
Mhm.
Right? Those can be incredibly like, and those are also ways I think for us to bring ourselves more to the present of like, look, I do have this. This is what shows me that I have power,
Mhm.
right? That I have more power and control than I think I do. Because when we experience trauma, when we experience sexual abuse, we don't have it. Like we feel like we cannot fight back. We don't fight back, right? Because we make that calculation that it's not going to help. It's going to make it worse,
Mhm.
right? So it doesn't happen. That's a myth that people fight back. It's a myth. I've
Mhm.
worked with for men who've been sexually abused, they don't fight back.
Mhm.
Doesn't happen, right? So for it's important to be able to ground to the present and say, like, now this is different. Now I have this. Now I have that. It can be incredibly like empowering for people. I also think I love somatic practices. I'm trained in EMDR, but which we use a lot of somatics, but I have a pretty good network here in Milwaukee of somatic practitioners that I refer to. And I think somatic practices are excellent
Mhm.
in healing trauma and also just feeling powerful and in control. So even things like martial arts
Mhm.
or yoga or boxing, right, can feel incredibly empowering. Dancing, right, like can feel incredibly empowering. Even just putting on like music and dancing in the kitchen is a way to reclaim personal power when the world is just so overwhelming. So little things like that.
Yeah, moving my body. And I did turn to martial arts. I have a punching bag. I do
Love it.
yoga. I'm in yoga training. So I completely relate to all of that. I also think that I find a lot of power in seeing progress with my body and like gaining strength. I used to work out to like look a certain way. That was my goal. And now it's like, I want to be stronger. Like, I want to be able to do more. I want to be able to push myself just a little bit further and seeing that difference. And I know I really experienced that with yoga. With each time I do a flow or a different move, I can
Mhm.
maybe go a little bit further than the last
Yes.
time. It's also like setting goals. That's another thing that I do. I set short term goals and long term goals. I'm gentle on myself if they don't work out, but it's that sense of progress within myself and knowing that I can do hard things. I
Yeah.
can do things that I set my mind to. And going back to the body with martial arts, like I can protect myself now.
Yes. Yeah, so powerful.
Hmm. And also just like setting boundaries and honoring myself in that way, I'm able to reclaim a lot of my personal power. Even like, especially with having a history of sexual violence, being able to say, no, don't touch my body right now.
Yes.
Or teaching my kids,
Yes.
consent and bodily autonomy and what safe touch is.
Yeah.
Those types of things help me feel like I'm reclaiming my personal power.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Those are excellent.
What can allies do to better support survivors who are experiencing some of these negative impacts in an oppressive political climate?
Listen, like they can listen and work on understanding without judgment. It is so simple, but it's so hard for so many people to just listen.
Hmm.
Like people want to give their opinion about everything when they're uncomfortable. People want to feel in control of the narrative when they're uncomfortable.
Hmm.
People want to feel like that can't happen to my kid, right? Well, guess what? It can happen to your kid, right? And the myths of people who are sexually abused, sexual abuse does not discriminate social economic status. It does not discriminate, right? So it happens all over. And I think when people are uncomfortable and don't understand, they want to try to change the narrative. So one of the biggest things that people can do is listen without fixing, without advising. That is one of the biggest pieces, is people just want to give their opinion and tell their advice. And it is incredible. It is much more regulating and helpful for somebody who's experienced sexual violence, for somebody else just to listen and understand. That's it. I think if things do come up for you, you need to work on that. Like you need to understand, be curious about that. Like why is that coming up for me, that makes me so uncomfortable, that I'm having a hard time listening to my friend when she's telling me about how activated she is because of the political climate. Like this is really hard for me to hear. I want to be there for her, but it's really hard for me. So be curious about that.
Hmm.
Like talk to a therapist, do some journaling, do some self-reflection, and work on understanding, why is this coming up for me? Because I want to be there for my friend, right? I think amplifying voices of people who've been experienced sexual violence,
Hmm.
using privilege and power, right, to outwardly dispel myths, right? Or be explicit about believing somebody when other people don't. That's why when I work with people, when I work with people who've experienced sexual violence, sometimes there's a player in the story who was very healing to them. And sometimes it's a nurse, right? Or it's a detective.
Hmm.
And that person, or it's a social worker or a therapist, and that person is an important part of the story, maybe because they're in a role of power, like for example a detective, but they also spoke up.
Hmm.
They also called out the injustice. They also said, I believe you, this is not okay, right? And wrote it down, right? Or filed the report,
Hmm.
right? Helped you report it. And so we can still do that for people. Like people can still call out the injustice and say, I believe you. I don't think people can hear that. You can hear that too many times. I don't know what you feel, but I don't think people can feel that too many times, hear that too many times. I believe you. Yeah.
And I think that the more you hear it, the more it starts to feel real.
Yeah.
And like you said, healing and this path is not linear. And there are going to be those ups and those downs. And when you're in those downs, it's nice to hear those like words of affirmation, like, I believe you, and the
Yeah.
validation behind that,
Yeah.
because the world can feel so quick to dismiss these experiences. And along the way, there are people who will, unfortunately, for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
love that you bring up how to be there for the other person, but also how to be there for themselves. And I think that there's so much growth and healing in curiosity and being curious about why you are feeling or experiencing or reacting in certain ways. So I think that there's growth and healing on both sides in that answer of yours. I
Absolutely. Really well said.
think we got to all of the questions.
I really loved this conversation. You have such a great handle on I mean, obviously, it's very clear you've done your own healing.
Lots of therapy.
Lots of therapy. And healing isn't just therapy. Like I say this all the time, right? It can just be, I think so much healing happens too in groups. That's why I love group therapy, but also just being in community with people who've experienced something similar.
That's such a great point, too. I know, like, one of the things I experience from complex post-traumatic stress disorder is hyper independence. And I got to a point in my healing where I was like, I can handle all of this stuff. But then there's like
Mhm.
different levels of healing. I got into a serious relationship with my now husband, and it was like, I mean, I guess even dating along the way, there were things that I could handle on my own. But once there was another factor involved, it was a different level of healing. And then being able to be in groups and community, like it's a different level of healing. And
Yep.
the importance of bringing up being able to do that in community and being around people who are like-minded or who have similar experiences or who can just like hold space for that. And as promised, I will be sharing my favorite places to get news and trustworthy information in a way that does not re-traumatize me. I got my phone for this one. The first is Heather Cox Richardson. She is a political historian and writes in a very factual way, not in any sort of emotionally manipulative, fear-inducing, or triggering kind of way. I signed up for her daily newsletter. It comes in the evenings for me, which is perfect because it's after my kids have gone to bed, so I have time to process my own emotions without having to worry about helping somebody else process theirs, which can be really challenging after reading the news these days. I also believe that she does regular live streams on Facebook and might even have her own podcast. Definitely check her out. I also recommend Sammy Cantor over at Girl and the Gov on social media. She puts out a weekly newsletter and is very active on social media in a way that blends politics, culture, and digital storytelling to inform, engage, and drive impact. And I'm very excited to announce that she will be an upcoming guest on this podcast. Our conversation was about civic wellness and caring for yourself while being politically engaged. I can't wait to share it with you, so make sure you're subscribed, that way you don't miss it. And if I have space too, I like to check foreign news sites, in particular BBC. My mother-in-law put me on this one, so shout out to her for that. It really feels like a good, unbiased outside source. What are some of your favorite places to stay updated on the news? If you are watching this over on YouTube or Spotify, please leave a comment below so that way I can read it. And you also never know who else might be listening and could use that help. If you want to hear more about attachment therapy, radical acceptance, or navigating our current political climate, please send me a message and let me know. Your voice matters here, and I want it to shape the future of this podcast. In other words, I just want to give you more of what you want. Go follow me over on social media at Blumera Podcast or Breezy Boujou, and I will see you in the next episode.